if you can't communicate like a strategic leader, you'll get passed over for promotions, even if you're the hardest working person in the room. I know this because early in my career, other people kept getting picked for the promotions that I wanted because I couldn't get my points across when it mattered. So, in this video, I'm going to show you the 4 executive communication tactics that no one tells you that I now use to influence leaders at the highest level. I'm going to show you exactly what these insider secrets are and why you've never been told them before, how they're going to help you get noticed by senior leaders to advance your career, and why they work no matter if you're a fresh intern or already in the C-suite. Starting with the first tactic that, if you can do right, is the single highest valued skill in any corporate business and will put you on the fast track to leadership. So, tactic number 1. I once spent weeks developing this idea that my manager loved, and they even brought me into this executive meeting to present it. And this was my first real chance to show my capability. I made slides, I made meeting notes, I even prepared this handout to give to everyone. And then I got into the meeting, and before I could even say 5 words, the VP said that this isn't going to work, it's not worth anyone's time, and then the meeting just moved on. And I was so embarrassed by this. I sat there just wishing that the floor would swallow me there and then, because back then I assumed that the idea should speak for itself. I mean, if it helped the business in some way, then surely they'd like it. But as I'm about to show you, it's just not how it works. But the moment I learned how to make executives care about what I was saying right from the very first sentence, well, that's when everything changed, because suddenly my work wasn't invisible anymore. I started getting pulled into the rooms where decisions are actually made, and the people who could advance my career, they started remembering my name. And then pretty soon, I went from answering phones to executive in a multi-billion-dollar company. And it wasn't any qualification or friends in the correct places or years of experience that made it possible. It was a tiny shift in how I communicated. So let me show you how to do the exact same thing. I'll teach you how to win an executive's attention in under 5 seconds and set up every conversation so you look like someone who deserves bigger opportunities. And to do this, you only need to remember 3 simple things. So the thing you need to know is, executives decide whether your idea is worth listening to in just a few seconds, because they're judging your credibility before you've even finished your first sentence. So if the first thing out of your mouth sounds like more work or more complexity or more cost, then they're just going to ignore your idea no matter how good it actually is. And when that happens, it's going to cost you some credibility. And that means when it comes time for promotions, they're not going to think that you're ready yet. So now I'm going to show you exactly how you can establish that credibility in just a few seconds. And you do that by using the 3 O's as quickly as possible. And to show you exactly how this works, imagine that I'm in HR, right? And I want to present my idea to some executives for a new onboarding process. Now, previously, I would have started the meeting with something like, "Hello, everyone. This is my idea to change the onboarding process using AI." And that's going to instantly get you dismissed because it's missing the key ingredient that you need to open any communication. And because it's missing that, then all the executives heard was AI and HR, and then their little executive brains, they start immediately going, well, this sounds expensive. This is going to be too risky. This is just a distraction from the real work. So the reason that it doesn't work is because you're starting with the work instead of starting with the why. But it's really easy to get the why wrong. And so this is where the 3 O's come in, which stand for the outcome, which means like, which result are we actually going to get? Now, this should ideally be a number, even better if you can reference some kind of money. The second O is objective. So what part of the business is this improving because of your idea? And then finally, we have obstacle. So by taking on board your idea, what pain will disappear and who's it going to disappear from? And so if you want to use the 3 O's effectively, it's critical that you pick the correct ones and then combine them for the right situation. Now, to make this easy, I use this tool all the time. It gives me some guardrails for the 3 O's to make sure that I'm picking the correct ones. It also has ways to combine them for different situations at work, like maybe it's a resource request or a project update. And then down at the bottom, I've got some pre-made lines that I can just use for some inspiration. So using this, instead of that boring thing that I said earlier, you can say something like, we can reduce time to productivity by 25%, which is going to be worth about $1.2 million a year by improving onboarding with AI, and we can do this without it adding work to any of the hiring managers. And you can see where I've used the three O's in this because I'm going to highlight them on screen for you. And so you can see that by doing that, we're going to get a totally different reaction to how we began that meeting, because that's when executives are going to start paying attention and they're going to lean in, especially if you manage to use all three of the O's in a single sentence. And the reason that this is just so powerful is because you're not asking them to care about your idea, you're showing them why your idea already matters to them. And when you can do that, it's going to associate you with good ideas, which is going to raise your credibility and position you as someone who should reach the next level in their career. And I'll stick that template down in the description so you can download it as well. But once you've nailed the introduction, this is where I see a lot of professionals make the same mistake over and over again that just completely wrecks their credibility and exposes them as not leadership ready. So let me show you how to avoid making that mistake and what you should do instead. So tactic number 2. Right. When I first started speaking to senior leaders, I thought the hard part was just getting their attention. But once I finally had their attention, I realized that I didn't know how to keep it. I'd go into a presentation, and within minutes, I'd see executives slyly checking their phone on Facebook when they're pretending it's emails, but we all know what they're actually looking at. And that feels horrible, right? Because you know that your work is important and it's going to benefit the company, yet they just don't seem to want to see it. So this led me to trying what most people try. I downloaded some slide decks and presentation templates. I used McKinsey style decks that you can download. I filled it full of icons and put some fancy transitions in, thinking that this is going to get their attention. They're going to be so impressed with my slides if I could do this. But none of it changed anything because the slides were never the problem. So when I was trying to solve this, I just asked myself a really simple question. I just said, what is it they actually want? And what if I just focused on that instead? So I changed the way I started communicating, and suddenly it started working. And I began leading all these meetings that moved decisions forward. And I've taught more than 70,000 professionals how to communicate more effectively so their ideas are heard. And companies started paying me $400 per slide to help them tell their information clearly and get their message to land. And the thing was, the change I made was really, really easy to do. Anyone can do it. So now I'm going to show you exactly how you can avoid the mistakes almost everyone makes and what to do instead so executives actually stay engaged and care about what you're saying. So inside any meeting, whether it's an update or a pitch or a review, you've probably got a handful of important key messages that you want the audience to understand. And the default approach that most people take is they just line them all up and then one by one they work through them and they put them in some kind of logical order. In other words, they just sort of dump everything into one big block because they think, well, all of this is important, so they'll definitely pay attention. Well, they won't. The structure ends up really messy. It makes it really difficult for anyone to follow. And the execs are just left working harder to try and figure out what it is you're saying. And if there's one thing that executives do, it's not work hard. And this is why this is a problem, because our brains function in two different systems. So you've got system 1, which responds to emotion and interest, and it's a lot faster. And then you've got system 2. This is the slower, logical, detailed part of our brains that can take the time to really digest the information that you're trying to present them. And so the problem is, when you put all your information in order like this, you're just giving information to system 2, and what's going to happen is it's going to fill up reach its limit, which happens really quickly, surprisingly. And then that's when people stop listening. Not because they didn't care, but because the structure you used was making their brains work too hard to follow along to your information. So what I'm going to do is I'll show you what you should be doing instead. And it looks like this. You break up each point so that it has two parts. And you can see we've got point one, and then it's broken into two things. Firstly, you've got the relevance and the tension parts of what it is you're communicating. And then you come in with the key message. And what this does is it allows their brain to switch between focusing on system one, then system two, then system one, then system two, and so on. And this is going to be able to keep their attention for a lot longer. So, tactic number two is dead simple. Don't dump all your information, break it into this structure that builds momentum as you go through the information you're trying to communicate. I can read your mind right here. Your question is, okay, but how do I do that? Well, that's exactly what I'm about to show you now. So, tactic number three. Let's stick with the onboarding example for this one. Now, let's say that one of the points that I want to do in my presentation is I want to talk about how exactly we're going to deliver this transformation. And normally, this is where people would just take a bunch of bullet points and throw them onto a slide that looks something like this. And if you're me, you probably tried to make it look fancy by downloading some slides or some kind of McKinsey framework or something. And as you know by now, that's not going to work. So let me show you what you should do instead. And it all begins by asking one simple question, which is, what would an executive want to know next? Based on the information you've just given them. And this is where you can use ChatGPT or something to help. You just paste in the points from your slide and ask it, what would an executive want to know if I gave them this information? And then you just use that. So that's what I've done, and this is what ChatGPT said about this information. It said that executives would probably want to know, well, how are they going to get that improvement? What's it going to cost, and when are they going to see the improvement? And how do we make sure people don't push back on this? And now, this is incredibly complicated, so pay attention. No, I'm just kidding. It's really easy. You just take that and then you say it before you tell them the information. For example, you just say something like, so now I'm going to walk you through how we'll get to the productivity gain and how we're going to track it, what the investment looks like and when this will pay you back, and how we're going to mitigate the biggest risks to adoption. That's literally it, right? That line is emotional. It's going to activate system one. It's going to create this curiosity and tension and anticipation for what you're about to say. And once you've said all that, executives are going to listen to the information that comes next. But just because you've given the information doesn't mean you're actually going to get recognized and credited for doing the work. So this next tactic is about making sure you actually get the credit for your ideas that you've already delivered, because a lot of people do the work and deliver outcomes, and then the recognition seems to always land on someone else, on anyone except for them. So I'll show you how to fix that so you don't end up stuck in the same level while other people keep moving ahead for the good work that you did. So tactic number four, right? There was this time where I was put forward for this promotion and I was really excited. And I thought that I was obviously going to get this because my boss said I was really good and I had their back on it. But as you can guess, I got rejected for it. And the reason was the VP above my boss said that I wasn't ready yet because, quote, Josh has some good ideas, but he doesn't deliver results. You can tell. I really remember that quote so painfully. And hearing that, I was absolutely devastated because I felt like I was doing everyone's job, not just my own. I think I went home and started applying for jobs on LinkedIn that very night. But I ended up having this moment where I'm thinking, how is it possible that I'm doing all the work and frankly other people's, and yet I'm not being seen for it? Why would someone else get all the credit whilst I stayed in the background? And that's when I realized something. I was being seen as someone who delivers work, but not the person who's actually driving the result. And to an executive, that difference is massive. They are two completely different people. So, when I finally started focusing on driving the outcomes and not just delivering them, that's when everything began to change. 6 months later, I went back for that promotional opportunity, and this time I got it really easily. And the VP said how much I'd grown in those last 6 months. Even though I didn't really change anything at all I did was change how I communicated in meetings and things to talk about the work that I was already doing. But it made the credit land on me instead of someone else, and that was what was really important. So, next, I'm going to show you how you can do that exact same thing as well to make leadership recognize the value of the work that you're already doing without adding a single extra hour of work to your week. So, in any meeting or any communication at all, really, there's three parts to it. You've got the opening and introduction, where you get their attention. You've got the middle, where you share their detail. And then we have how you wrap up the meeting. And the good news is, we've just talked about the beginning and middle. So, what we're going to focus on now is how you end it. And this part is really critical and matters so much more than people realize. Because the mistake I see so many professionals do is they end meetings in a way that disconnects them from the outcome, and they position themselves as the person who delivered the work and not the person who's actually getting the result. And that was the exact trap that I fell into when I was trying to get that promotion. And it was also the trap that one of my clients, Andrew, fell into. He was basically running this huge project, and yet every time a win happened, somehow his boss seemed to get all the credit. But we eventually figured out why this was happening. You see, his boss had these regular one-on-one meetings with the executives. So they were in those meetings saying things like, here's what's happening, here's what's going on, here's what's being driven right now. Meanwhile, Andrew was only visible in the project update meetings. So even though he was the one doing all the work, his boss was seen as the one leading it in those private meetings. But by changing how we ended the meetings, suddenly the recognition started going towards Andrew. So let me show you exactly how you can do that as well. So most people end a meeting with something like, okay, and that's it. Any questions, anyone? And that's the worst way you can end any meeting, because what you just did there was you handed the steering wheel to someone else. And that's when your manager can jump in with something like, right, so the next steps are X, Y, Z. And now they look like the one who's driving the project forward. And this is called creating momentum. And what it does is it means that Andrew's boss is now the one who's creating the momentum, which means pushing progress forward. And so when the project succeeds, Andrew's boss is the one who gets recognized for making it succeed. So if you want the recognition to go to you, all you really need to do is, at the end of the meeting, is lead it with momentum. And I'll show you exactly how you can do it. So instead of ending with any questions, which just hands your work over to someone else, you take charge of the next steps, even if it's something really small. And to do that, all you need to do is say something like, great, so now that we're aligned on the objective and the outcome, I'll take this action next and I'll come back to you by Thursday, or something like that. This immediately puts you back into the driver's seat. And this is where that toolkit comes in really handy again, because you can just wrap up the end using the 3 O's one more time and say, so to achieve this outcome, we're aligned to this objective, and to avoid this risk, this is what I'm going to do next. Now, even if the manager comes in after you and provides some next steps, it doesn't matter, because they're seen as facilitating the direction you set. They're not steering the whole thing themselves, which means the credit still goes to you. And making sure you actually get recognized for the results that you're delivering is the biggest difference between being stuck in your role for years and moving up so fast, HR begin to wonder if their system is broken because your salary keeps going up. And ending meetings is just one of several ways to stop remaining invisible. So if you want to avoid being overlooked and finally seen as someone who deserves the next big step up, then watch this video next, where I show you exactly how to do it.